Hey, gentlemen, this is Vince Miller. Thank you so much for joining me for another devotional. Today, we're going to be in John chapter 11. I'm going to read verses 38 down through 43. We're deep into the story of Lazarus being raised from the dead. Here's how the text reads. Then Jesus, deeply moved again, so we kind of hear his emotions, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone lay against it. There's no doubt in my mind that Jesus is thinking about his own grave and the stone that's going to be placed in front of it. Jesus said, "Take away the stone." Martha, the sister of the dead man, that's Lazarus, said to him, "Lord, by this time there will be an odor, for he has been dead 4 days." And if you've been around bodies that have been dead for a while, you understand there's going to be a bad, horrible, hard to swallow stench. And Jesus said to her, "Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?" So a little bit of a chastisement here. So they took away the stone. Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, so he's praying out loud. He says, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this on account of the people standing around, that they may believe that you sent me." So Jesus is preaching to us in his prayer. When he had said these things, he cried out with a loud voice, and he screamed, is what it means, "Lazarus, come out." Now, fellas, the miracle of this text is pretty significant, but today I want to focus on what Jesus is doing in the text because it's a remarkable example for me as a man, for you as a man today. So Jesus is proudly allowing his ongoing spiritual connection to God to be very public, because you see, he never lets the indictments of the opposition keep him from speaking the truth. He never lets public pressure shame him and keep him from doing what God wants him to do. With this proud spiritual confidence, he's even going to pray out loud with the understanding that God's going to hear him and respond to him. In fact, he prays out loud as a verbal declaration of this connection that he has to God, and even tells us that he's saying it out loud, even though he doesn't need to say it out loud, so that we will see the divine connection between God and him in this moment with Lazarus. Here's what I want you to pick up today. As believing men, our connection to God should be so real and evident that others can see it. I mean, what we say and what we do in public, with a sense of pride in God, gives credence to the faith. Our words and our actions about Jesus are actually a testimony that helps others make a connection that they're not going to make on their own if we don't make it for them. And what's so interesting about these thoughts today is that we're in a calendar month commonly known as Pride Month. And during this month, there's a strong push for us to embrace pride and reject any sense of shame that individuals may feel as victims of certain circumstances. Yet from a Christian perspective, we're called to hold to the teachings of the Bible, which identifies some of these ideologies and practices as immoral. Now, the agenda of this campaign is not for us to just kind of simply coexist with immoral choices, but they, the world, corporations, and organizations, want us to actively celebrate and endorse these activities. And what I find troubling about this is the double standard, especially for Christians, because over the past few decades, the same organizations and institutions have demanded our support, have demanded us to be quiet. They want us to promote their ideologies, yet have discouraged believers from celebrating or endorsing ours. They have even shamed us into silence regarding matters that we should rightfully take pride in, while simultaneously demanding that we embrace ideologies that should actually elicit shame for a believer. And if you're wondering why all this is happening, I'm going to tell you why. We're witnessing the collision between two manifestations of sin. First, sin that is actively and openly disobedient to God by unbelievers. Second, sin that is passively and silently disobedient to God by believers. The combination of this active disobedience by unbelievers and passive disobedience by believers has created a cultural phenomenon that I'm still trying to determine if we will ever recover from. And you probably are too. But I know this: Jesus gives us a remarkable example of what to do in this text. Jesus proudly and unashamedly stood up and spoke up about his connection with the Father. He was not going to be ashamed, and he was not going to be silent. He knew the risk. He knew the fate that awaited him. He was looking at a grave and probably thinking about his own grave, and knew that 2 miles away, just over the horizon, over the hill, over the Mount of Olives, great harm awaited him. And still he spoke the truth proudly so that we could see the connection between him and God, even though the opposition wanted him to be silent. Fellas, we got to follow suit with Jesus here. If we remain silent and ashamed of our faith in God, people will never recognize a connection between us and God. It's time for us today to rid ourselves of our passivity and start being proud during Pride Month. And not proud of sin, nor proud of ourselves, but proud of God. We should be proud of God's work in and through us. So don't be silent and ashamed any longer. If you do, you're only contributing to the problem. Hope you see what I just did to you. I shamed you a bit, but maybe in a godly direction. I love you guys. Thanks for joining me. If this has blessed you, share it with someone else proudly, and I'll see you right back here again